Hi and welcome back. A franchise I've always been interested in is Darksiders. And just a few weeks ago we completed the very first game in the series. And today I wanted to talk to you about the second game in that series. So let's get into it. So Darksiders 2 is a pretty interesting game overall. There's a lot of good in Darksiders 2. As an example, the game is way more open. It has an entirely new loot system and a lot of variety in builds and skills that you can pick and choose from. It's a really fun time to play, and honestly holds up way better than I had any expectation of it doing. However, there's one major flaw looking at Darksiders 2, and that is that it's a nightmare to run on a modern system. I think it deadass took me 2 hours just to get the game to run without any lag or any crashes. And it will still occasionally crash, but it was more bearable than before. You see, off the box when I installed Darksiders 2, I would have a shit ton of crashes every time I'd open my inventory. I would almost immediately crash within the game. And that is a bit of an issue when you have a loot system where you have to equip different items and so on. For me, playing around with the video settings fixed it eventually. I'm pretty sure it was the V-Sync turning that on and also putting it in window mode seemingly fixed the entire problem that I had. But maybe that was also just because I was playing the definitive edition, which cute pun, but still. I just think that a game should come out of the box pretty much ready to play if you are buying it. And in this case, you are buying Darksiders 2 if you want to play it, and I think it's a bit of a shame that I have to mention these technical issues. That being said, let's get into it properly. To understand Darksiders 2, you first have to understand a little bit about Darksiders 1. You see, in the first game you play as War, and War is a big man, and as a big man, he has a big sword, and his big sword is a kind of slow swinging great sword. You see, he feels overall a lot slower than what the second game feels like. And that is for a good reason. You see, War's personality is very much reflected within his gameplay. In his gameplay, he's slow, hard-hitting, very direct with his attacks. And when you see him in cutscenes and so on, he's also very direct, states his business directly. He is the immovable force. He is incredibly cool, and even his walking animation states the same thing. He is walking like a refrigerator. You can feel the heaviness of this man walking there. And he is an incredibly cool character that, due to the events of the first game when the seal is broken and he arrives at Earth, causes the end times, and apparently the forces at B believe that he caused it on purpose. And as such, in the second game, you're playing as War's brother Death, and you're trying to prove War's innocence. And to do that, you have to travel to the Tree of Life, and there will be an entire storyline that will follow within that I won't spoil all too much. But what is important to note is that Death throughout Darksiders 2 is much different than War in almost every facet that you can imagine, from his personality to his gameplay style. War, in terms of his gameplay style, was slow, he was very heavy with his sword. He felt like the 99 strength build in Elden Ring. Death is the opposite. He's agile, he's fast. He might not hit as hard, but he sure as fuck does more DPS. He will teleport through enemies. He will fly around the battlefield, summoning armies of skeletons if that's what you want. You really do have a lot of freedom with Death. And Death is also represented like that within the dialogue. You see, whereas War was very no nonsense, Death will take every opportunity to be as sassy as humanly possible. And for me, that does mean that I end up liking Death quite a lot more. It feels like he actually has a really fleshed out personality within the game, and I absolutely adore that. I also love some of the backstory that you will hear about Death and some of the other wars he's had to fight. However, that is not the only thing that changes from Darksiders 1 to Darksiders 2. The entire world in Darksiders 2 is very much open, whereas you can argue that Darksiders 1 had some open zone-ish elements. Here it is almost fully open world, I'd argue. There are dungeons you can go into to get the smaller corridor gameplay style, which I really enjoy personally, but the main part of the world is completely open and you can explore it almost however you want. However, that being said, there are obviously mission objectives that will guide you in one direction. But the game overall does play really well as an open world game. And I think it's really fun to explore. You even have a horse again, and you have a cool horse as well. It's a joy to ride. I will say I feel like sometimes the controls can be a little bit funky, but the visuals more than make up for it. It is the rule of cool. The horse looks cool, so I'm gonna use the horse. And in terms of the moment-to-moment gameplay, Darksiders 2 remains really honest to the series' roots. It is a glorified collectathon. You have a bunch of stuff to pick up that you can sell to merchants of quests and so on. You'll have your variation of side quests, and more importantly, they have introduced an entire loot system with rarities and all of that good stuff. So you will have time to set up different builds and go for different stats to focus on specific parts of your weapon. As an example, I went for a very heavy crit build at times, and that was really fun. But you can also go for a Wrath build, which is this game's version of mana, which refills by just attacking an enemy. So you can get more Wrath generation going, so you can throw more abilities. It's really, really fun, and you have a lot of different items to experiment with and just play around with. And that includes weapons. While your main and primary weapon will be the scythes that you can switch out for different scythes, it will never change how the animations play and how fast you are. However, your secondary weapon will change a lot. Anywhere from a hammer to an axe to a big old sword to claws to some weird shield that I never quite figured out how to use, or rather a glove. It is always very fluid, and those items really can change how your character flows. For me, I ended up when I had a hammer making a build that was about me dodging and then doing my attack, because then you are thrown into an animation where you jump with the hammer, meaning that you can move and attack your enemies at the same time. So I deal heavy damage by just rolling into my enemies and doing that. It was not the most effective thing in the world, but it sure was fun. There are even these things called sacrifice weapons, where you can level the weapon up higher the more weapons you sacrifice to them. And when you do that, you get to pick a new stat for them, which means they become incredibly powerful, incredibly quickly. It is fantastic, and it's fun to play around with. And it really does open up a lot of possibilities for how you want to play, and to explore your unique version of death. And I think that's a really, really cool thing to have. And that's not to say that other games we do doesn't do that, it's just that Darksiders 2 does it particularly well. I also for once think that the puzzles aren't completely ass. I actually like how they were made this time around, being that they felt right into that good part about me not solving them instantly, but me also not spending 6 hours and a guide on them. Nor did they constantly interrupt me by showing me what I had just unlocked or just opened, which is a really big blessing that I completely love about Darksiders 2. It really hit that perfect amount between cutscenes that shows you new stuff and just allowing you to fuck around in the game. It's really perfect in that regard and something that I really appreciate. I also really love the unique playstyles that every area that you visit have. You see, there's unique mechanics to almost every single area, and not just something you will pick with you up and continue. While yeah, those exist as well, you will gain new abilities as you play through the game. Every area has its own sort of unique area mechanic. For the very first area you will be in, it will be these golems that you can sit on top of, and then you can like launch the arm across caverns to walk on it and so on. It's really, really cool, and there's a lot of these smaller unique areas. The second realm you visit is the Land of the Dead, and in there you can find these lanterns that will point to a direction, and when they point to the right area, then they'll like do something. It can be open a door or open a bridge and so on. It's really cool, and there's a lot of these sort of unique mechanics, and I really appreciate that. And that is not to say that all of them are executed equally. I do think the area in the Lands of the Dead, honestly, is my least favorite. I just don't like that mechanic a whole lot, but that is a personal preference thing more so than a game bad thing. And on top of all of that, I think the art style for Darksiders is perfect. It's such a pretty game. Even now, more than 14 years after it came out, it's still really good looking. And I genuinely mean that. I think it's gorgeous, and I absolutely adore the different looks of the world, from the lush forest-ish areas of the northern realm, the Forge Lands, to the much grayer, more sandy areas of the Realm of the Dead and so on. They are so fucking cool, and I adore how they're put together. I really genuinely do. One of those things that you just don't appreciate enough, in my opinion, when you're playing through a game, until it's over is really how well that sort of stuff is put together. It's just so good every time. It's really a standout for me with Darksiders, and it was in Darksiders 1 as well. I also just absolutely love, and I mean love, the way that different quests are written and so on. The side quests even are good. They're fun mostly. There's a lot of collector funds, and while I'm not a big fan of that particularly genre of side quests, there's a lot of the other ones that I really enjoy, such as the ones where you have to hunt down a big boss and so on. And that's because it ties into the very best thing about Darksiders 2, that being the combat, the free flow of it, and how fast and good it feels. And if you play the definitive edition of the game like I did, you also get access to the free DLCs, the Abyssal Forge, Argus Tomb, and the Demon Lord Baal. And all of them are pretty alright. My personal favorite has to be Orgul's Tomb, and of course the Demon Lord of Baal is a good old second place, with the Abyssal Forge being my least favorite out of the bunch. Simply just because I didn't enjoy the dungeon that you are in as much. They're all short, they're all sweet, and they all have new loot and gear for you to play around with, and new stories to tell, with each of them having their own little interesting take on different things, such as the Demon Lord Baal DLC being about a human survivor after the apocalypse, and it's all just really cool. I enjoy the vibes that are given here, and I think they are all pretty good DLCs. And if you really quickly want to run through at least some of the story, it is about, like I said, you trying to prove your brother's innocence, and the way you do that is by traveling to the Tree of Life, and throughout your travels you find out the world has been hit with this corruption-ish type of thing, and the corruption is something that you really don't know anything about, you don't really care about for the largest time in the game. Every other character is scared to death of it as it means the end of that world. But you don't care, you just need to go to the Tree of Life. So as you go to the Tree of Life, you'll fight corrupted enemies, and eventually find out that your old friend, somebody that you knew in your previous life, somebody who you'd even call a brother, well, he is the source of the corruption, and there's all of this sort of interpersonal drama that is honestly pretty good, and I'd say it's overall pretty well written throughout the game, and I think it's a joy to play through, if I'm being quite frank. And after you enter the Tree of Life the first time, you end up in the Realm of the Dead, then the second time you end up in the Angels Realm, and then you end up back at Earth. And that was the last time you end up back at Earth is the one that I personally really enjoy a lot, because it's also a little bit different from the other realms you see on Earth. Whereas in all of the other realms you're using your scythe, you're using your melee tools. On Earth, that's not the case. You get a big old fuck-off gun. It becomes one of those third-person shooter segments from the first game, and it plays quite well in my opinion. Dare I say, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I am curious about how a game where that would be the entirety of it would feel. I really enjoy what they did here, and I think that was pretty fun. And by the end you'll end up back to the demon realm. You'll go, well, not back to the demon realm, but you'll end up back in a demon realm, and then you'll go and take the fight to the corruption, and ultimately there'll be some little cliffhanger ending that I won't spoil too much of. That is the really abbreviated version of the story. There's a lot more that goes on, and there's a lot more characters that you'll meet. As an example, the entirety of the Forge Lands seems to be themed around Scotland, with Scottish accents everywhere, and the nature also being sort of themed around, you know, Europe and so on. It's really cool, and I really enjoy especially the Forge Lands. I just think they stand out for having so much more color and so on, and I really enjoy it. I really do. I think the game has the perfect art style to pull this off, with a lot of colors, a lot of fantasy elements being pulled in. And overall, when it comes to a game like Darksiders 2, it is incredibly ahead of its time. Both through the open world design, but also the combat style feeling so good, even in modern day. That is a game that I genuinely think is really good, even surprisingly so. That being said, it's a shame that it is being dragged down by all of the technical issues that I mentioned at the beginning. Crashes and so on, it's just a shame, because Darksiders 2, even now, even in modern day, feels like a modern game. It is incredibly fun to play when it works, but most of the time it just unfortunately doesn't unless you fuck around with the settings. And in my opinion, that is a extremely big shame. However, despite my love of Darksiders 2, it does become a hard game to recommend simply due to the technical jank. And when I say that, I don't mean the game sometimes feeling a little bit buggy or anything like that. I mean the full-on crashes and glitches, and the fact that you'll need a pseudo-science degree before you can even get the game to run. Of course, that's overstating it a bit, but you will have to be willing to fuck around with the settings to make this game even playable to begin with. And I think that is a bit of a shame, because the game is really, really good once it is up and running. And I think having to fuck around with the settings with a game like this is probably a turn-off for quite a few people. And I don't know, that rubs me the wrong way, but overall Darksiders 2 is really, really good. It holds up incredibly well. There's more that I haven't talked about, such as a crucible mode where you essentially have to fight these waves, and there's another different pseudo wave mode where you'll be exploring a labyrinth. There's a lot, and it's really fun, and I love the boss fights, and I love the story, and I am looking forward to playing Darksiders 3 after playing Darksiders 2. Unfortunately, from what I hear and what I understand, Darksiders 3 isn't the same as Darksiders 2, and for at least it seems like a lot of people, slightly worse. But we'll see how things turns out when I actually get around to playing it. But for now, that's been it for me. Darksiders 3 is probably a little bit further out into the future for me to play in comparison to the wait time between Darksiders 1 and Darksiders 2. Simply because there's a lot of games coming out, and at least for Code Vein 2, I know I will be playing that when it comes out, or at least a few days afterward. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do the YouTube stuff, like, comment, and subscribe, all of that. And, thank you for watching. It really does mean the world to me, and it's nice coming back to talk to something that isn't as disgusting as what we talked about last week. I love making these videos, and you don't have to fret, I'm not going away from gaming. I probably never will. I've been a gamer my entire life, and I'll probably continue to play games for the rest of it. But that all being said, I'll see you all next week. Have a good one, and goodbye.